Kentucky's Voice is your home for real news, real people, and real answers. Can't do it without you. Your financial support helps us bring truth to the forefront, hold leaders accountable, and give a voice to the people of the Commonwealth. Join the fight today. Give online at kyvoice.org or text KYVoice to 53555. Every gift makes a difference. Stand with us. Speak up. Stay strong. You are Kentucky's voice.
Are you ready to stand for truth? Kentucky is at a crossroads, and we need voices that won't back down. This is your moment to rise, speak up, and be part of a movement that's changing the narrative in the Commonwealth. Kentucky's Voice is calling on bold citizen journalists, fearless editors, and those unafraid to speak truth in the public square. Volunteer, intern, contribute. Scan the QR code or visit kyvoice.org to join the fight. This is more than media. This is your moment. You are Kentucky's voice.
Open borders, shameful abandonment, disregard for human life, the prospect of more mandates and lockdowns, and the list goes on. Now more than ever, we need to stick together. Voting alone is not enough. We must use our dollars to support like-minded companies that fight for our rights and beliefs. Patriot Mobile is America's only Christian conservative wireless provider who shares your values. Last year, we gave more than $500,000 to conservative causes. With your support, we'll give more than $1.5 million this year. It's time to band together and support companies that truly love America and fight for our freedoms. Will you join us?
Kentucky's Voice is your home for real news, real people, and real answers. But we can't do it without you. Your financial support helps us bring truth to the forefront, hold leaders accountable, and give a voice to the people of the Commonwealth. Join the fight today. Give online at kyvoice.org or text KYVoice to 53555. Every gift makes a difference. Stand with us. Speak up. Stay strong. You are Kentucky's voice.
Are you ready to stand for truth? Kentucky is at a crossroads, and we need voices that won't back down. This is your moment to rise, speak up, and be part of a movement that's changing the narrative in the Commonwealth. Kentucky's Voice is calling on bold citizen journalists, fearless editors, and those unafraid to speak truth in the public square. Volunteer, intern, contribute. Scan the QR code or visit kyvoice.org to join the fight. This is more than media. This is your moment. You are Kentucky's voice.
Open borders, shameful abandonment, disregard for human life, the prospect of more mandates and lockdowns, and the list goes on. Now more than ever, we need to stick together. Voting alone is not enough. We must use our dollars to support like-minded companies that fight for our rights and beliefs. Patriot Mobile is America's only Christian conservative wireless provider who shares your values. Last year, we gave more than $500,000 to conservative causes. With your support, we'll give more than $1.5 million this year. It's time to band together and support companies that truly love America and fight for our freedoms. Will you join us?
This is Kentucky's Voice Radio, covering the latest state and local issues with Tom Fallbush, Bob Scott, and Jim Waters.
All right, welcome to Kentucky's Voice. I'm your host today, Tom Fallbush, and it's just me today. So I usually have Bob Scott with me today, but it's just me today. So we are going to talk about a few things. You know, we've been covering a lot of the No Kings rally, right? That happened last Saturday. We've been covering a lot of that prior to that event, and so I think it's fitting to kind of touch on what happened and what's just what the impact of that was. And also just broadly, I'd like to just talk about, where the country is right now and where is it going to go? Where are we going to be? We still have this polarization. We still have these two tribes, right, that don't really care for one another. And well, I'll take that back. I think one side does care. I think conservatives and people that are on the right typically we don't think that the other side are unhuman or need to be shot or need to be, ostracized or canceled. We just see them as misguided people that are living astray, so to speak. But the left, there's an instinct of violence there, and it always has been ever since the beginning. I mean, you want to look at where the left started. I mean, the French Revolution is basically where the left began, and all the the philosophy of Rousseau and all this stuff, and then the communes and the Jacobins and all this stuff. So the left has always at its core been violent, and the reason is because they're utopian, right? They believe that they can create heaven on earth if we can just tweak a few things, if we could just change a few ideas, if we could just take out a few people, if we can just pull down the elite and take out the king of France, or if we can just get rid of the bourgeois, or get rid of the kulaks in Russia, all we have to do is or if we can just get rid of these conservative Americans who are haters and all these racists in America, if we can just get rid of these people, then we can usher in utopia. We can bring in this heaven on earth, and it's a common theme that we've been living with for a couple hundred years, and unfortunately, there's a lot of folks in America they really haven't been educated to the whole history of the left and what they're about and what. It's just a cursory reading of history. You would say, okay, look, there's 100 million people that are in graves right now over the past 100 years because of the left. And maybe we should think about that and think about why that happened, and what's the motivation, what's some of the language that led to this. But no, we don't cover that in schools because and elementary or high school or even college, because those institutions have been taken over by the left. They don't want to hang out their dirty laundry. They want to just say it's the traditional Americans. It's America's racist and America's got all this this baggage, and they're the saviors. And so anyway, so we're at this point where so many people are believing this and have bought into this stuff, and we've kind of, and so two things that's growing, that's emerging, but there's a reason that is emerging is because America has drifted from its moral core, from its Judeo-Christian instincts. It's religion, basically. When you give up on God, when you give up on throughout the history of the West, when countries pull back from their religious heritage, leftism fills the vacuum, because leftism is a counterfeit religion, right? Marxism and socialism, all this stuff is a counterfeit religion. and a good, we got about 30 seconds left for the break, but the great dissident, Soviet dissident, and Solzhenitsyn, Alexander Solzhenitsyn, would say that, because he said when he was young, when communism first took over in Russia, he remembered the older folks saying that the reason this has happened to us, the reason this calamity has happened to us, is because Russia turned away from God. And he remembered that, and this as a boy, and lived, of course, his story, went through the gulags, went through everything, just so. Folks, it's dark, but here we are. We still got to figure this out. We'll be right back. We're talking about where we're going as a country.
Back to Kentucky's Voice Radio, online at kyvoice.org.
All right, welcome back to the show, Kentucky's Voice. I'm your host today, Tom Fallbush. And of course, last Saturday was the great No Kings protest, right? We've been covering this quite a bit over the past few weeks, and the reason I've kind of focused in on it is it's emblematic of this ongoing struggle that we're having in the country, and that isn't resolved yet. It's not resolved. Just because Trump won and there's been a coalescing of traditional and conservative America to put him in office and give him support, there is still a very large contingent of people in this country that are very hostile to that, and they may be on their heels, but they're probably going to bounce back, But, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, because I can pontificate all day long. I've got the microphone, but I really want to hear your thoughts on this. So text me at 502-571-0970, 502-571-0970. And here's the question. The question is this. Does the left, are they at a point where they are starting to marginalize themselves to irrelevancy? Or is it something that's going to sort of reconstitute itself and try to do some sort of color revolution or some sort of movement where they have to be, or a pushback is going to have to be, it's going to have to happen again, and on whatever level, right? It could look like a lot of things. You look at history, it just, pushing back on the left, it can mean a lot of things, from counter revolutions to, God help us, civil war. I'm not saying that's where we are going to go or where we could go, but I tell you what, that if someone would have said we're at where we are now, where the left is assassinating public intellectuals and trying to assassinate leaders of political movements, and somebody who said that 10 years ago, they would have thought that, what? You're crazy. That's, okay, so we moved the Overton window quite a bit over the past 10 years. Now, move forward 10 years from now, when a lot of the conservative boomers have passed on, right? And you have a very large millennial population that is still came of age in this whole social media indoctrination and college indoctrination system, and there's they're doubled down, and plus they're not doing well financially, right? Because of the economy, the way it's been rigged against them in a lot of ways. So they're going to gravitate towards left-wing ideas just for economic reasons, if anything else, if we don't get the economy straight. But so 10 years from now, where does this go? All right, where does this go? And if you look at just how unhinged they are, I'll tell you what I want to do. I want to play a few videos of just the No Kings protests, and just to show you this is where people are still. And Mr. Producer, I'm going to try to pull this up if I can get a...
Hey! You ever heard of those?
Okay, this is a lady. I'm going to let this. She is making fun of Charlie Kirk's assassination. She's basically pointing at her neck. If you're on radio, she's basically laughing. Is somebody coming by with a Trump flag and it's trying to, trigger those folks? So this lady's going, ha ha. She puts up 2 fingers to her neck and jokes that, ha ha. Apparently she's a teacher, and I think she's going to lose her job. I think that she's been doxxed, and it's been pretty interesting. So, and now listen to this lady. This is this sounds like somebody that might be your aunt, right? Maybe your liberal aunt who went to college, right? And let's see what she has to say about where we are.
Need to get ourselves together, and we might even need to be a little bit meaner, because the Republicans don't mind being mean.
And by mean, what do you mean? Do you mean protesting? Do you mean...
Maybe we have to, stop being so nice.
Because you seem like a pretty nice lady.
I'm a pretty nice lady, but I can be pretty mean, too.
Okay, and I have to ask this because people on the other side are going to say that they feel like the Democrat Party has been mean. Recently, with Charlie Kirk being assassinated,
He's a piece of garbage. Of course we were mean. I am so tired of people saying, oh, but, it's a terrible thing. No, Hitler is dead. I'm glad Hitler's dead. Evil people have no place in my world. He was a hateful human being. It was disgusting, the things that he said and did. I don't have time for that. I'm sorry. I have to point my energy in other directions.
So this is a lady that's just, seems like a nice middle class, older, baby boomer lady, somebody you would kind of respect, even though she might be a leftist. You might want to respect her because she's probably somebody's mother or somebody's grandmother or something. And she's saying stuff like this, like, no, I'm glad he's dead. I'm glad that he's been assassinated, and he's evil. And so this, what do you do with people like this? What do you do with when there's a lot of people like this? And there's a lot of people like this. What do you do? And now what's going to happen is the leaders on the far left, they're going to try to coalesce these people and continue to keep them, indoctrinated and ginned up on this stuff. And they're going to try to do what they call a color revolution, right? And if you don't know what a color revolution is, this is something that was basically invented by the CIA and intelligence services throughout the world, but mainly in the U.S., and as a technique to overthrow hostile governments. And this is, I think it had its genesis in the Cold War. Hey, we need to overthrow this government so they'll be more pro-U.S. as opposed to pro-Soviet and whatever. It metastasized in the 90s, and to where, okay, now we just need to use this technique to overthrow government. So the quintessential color revolution is, say, Libya, right, is Gaddafi, right, or the Maidan revolution in Ukraine, which is what we instituted. We did a color revolution in Ukraine. And if you're not familiar with that story, basically the U.S., we weren't real happy. Of course, the Obama administration wasn't happy with this Russian-supported president who was just elected in Ukraine. Maybe there was some corruption. There was why he got elected. Who knows? I mean, this is a corrupt part of the world. So, yeah, there probably was some corruption in how he got elected. But what we did is we said, okay, we're going to go in and institute a color revolution. Well, that is basically a technique of, first, sort of artificially generating protest, basically funding, in other words, like George Soros and the CIA, we go in and fund these protests and create this movement where the whole country feels like it's on edge. And then they start influencing media. Then they start destabilizing the institutions. And before you know it, the government just falls because it lost support. And it's called a color revolution. And so now the people who did this sort of thing are the people in USAID who just got fired, from that Trump just shut down, right? The USAID was the, headquarters of doing color revolutions, right? All these people are out of jobs, and now they're like, hey, we can do that in the U.S. Actually, what do you think just happened with Donald Trump in 2020? That looked like a color revolution in a lot of ways. And so the talk is that they're trying to coalesce their energies to do another one of these things. Matter of fact, let me just have someone better than me explain this. The great Glenn Beck, he's got a
If this movement is truly against billionaires and the powerful, why is it funded by billionaires and the powerful? This is not about dismantling power. This is about rearranging power. So according to several sources, including Fox News, George Soros and his Open Society Action Fund granted $3 million to Indivisible. Now, this is one of the primary organizers of the No Kings protest. Soros's larger network, the Open Society Foundation, gave over $7.6 million to the same operation. We're almost at $11 million, but Soros is not alone. If you follow the funding trail, it leads to, what a surprise, the Arabella Network. Now you add in the Bill Gates Foundation, or the Ford Foundation, or here's my favorite, the Rockefeller Network. There is now this organization funded by billionaires, Riots Inc., and it is the permanent protest industrial complex. These tactics were developed by the CIA, and they're called color revolutions. And what they do is they flood the streets with, quote, organic protesters. They control the media narrative. They destabilize the existing system, and then they overthrow that system and install a new one. It is part of a longer game. Once you convince free people that freedom itself is the problem, they'll beg for a change. And that's when the kings, the real kings, step out from behind the curtain. When there's an emergency for your own good, you have to remain inside. You're not an essential worker. You can only shop at Home Depot. That's the sign of a king. Kings, they don't have to wear crowns. Usually kings just sign checks. Sometimes they fund revolutions. They are the ones writing the script for the resistance, for their own power and kingdoms.
Yeah, so there we go. The great Glenn Beck. And so, folks, that's where we're at. And this isn't going to go away. We haven't won the war. We haven't won this battle, this struggle for America's soul. It is definitely ongoing, and it's going to have to be resolved. Because just as Abraham Lincoln said, a house divided cannot stand. We cannot have a country free and slave. Well, we cannot have a country that's free and woke, right? And woke is basically Marxism. And so I tell you what, we got about a minute left. I've got another clip I'm going to play of an intellectual making his rounds. I'm going to play it next segment, Mr. Producer. So making his rounds, is talking about what we really need to do and what the right is suddenly confronted with now. And it's like, it's no longer can we just have this back and forth of, sometimes the left wins, sometimes the right wins. We're at an existential moment. I don't think we can let the left win again, because we know what they're going to do. We know because they showed us what they're going to do in their last election, and so this is a real critical moment. We got to watch for this. We'll be right back. We're going to talk more about, can we survive?
Are you ready to stand for truth? Kentucky is at a crossroads, and we need voices that won't back down. This is your moment to rise, speak up, and be part of a movement that's changing the narrative in the Commonwealth. Kentucky's Voice is calling on bold citizen journalists, fearless editors, and those unafraid to speak truth in the public square. Volunteer, intern, contribute. Scan the QR code or visit kyvoice.org to join the fight. This is more than media. This is your moment. You are Kentucky's voice.
back to Kentucky's Voice Radio, online at kyvoice.org.
All right, welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Tom Fallbush, and I'm trying to look out ahead, right? We've of course lived through the second Trump election here. We're about almost a year into it, and I like to look out ahead. I like to see where we're going. Obviously, the day-to-day politics, day-to-day intrigues of what's going on is fascinating, but trend lines are what we're leaders need to be. You need to look, where are we going? And right now we still have this movement, this far left movement. I give it a pejorative of gay race communism, right? It's kind of it was wokeism, gay race communism, basically. So it's all basically communism, Marxism, socialism, wrapped up in this new, identity politics stuff. And it's still here. It's still, ingrained deeply in the heart of people in America. And it's because they are soulless in a lot of ways. A lot of folks are just empty. We're looking for meaning in our culture. We've given up on our traditional faith. And so when you give up on faith, it's not like you just have no faith. You fill it with some other faith. And so this other faith that's filling people's hearts has been leftism, because it gives you this sense of right and wrong. These people in the No Kings protests feel like they're doing something righteous. And they're fighting against the sinners. You and I are the sinners. So it's a whole religious system of saints and sinners and good and evil. And they're the attempt to create utopia on earth, which has been the temptation of the left from day one, is still here today. And if you don't have a tragic view of the world, which is what the biblical, Judeo-Christian worldview gives us, a tragic view of human nature, that we're all fallen, we all are sinful, that you cannot create a utopia on earth. The best we can do is create the systems of checks and balances and free market systems, so that, and also the best you can do is make sure that there is a transformation of the heart of the people in a country, because even our founders knew this. Our founders knew that. So there's a story of a lady who asked, I think, Ben Franklin, as he was coming out of the Constitutional Convention, and they said, Mr. Franklin, what kind of government did you give us? And then I think his words were, a republic, my dear, if you can keep it. And so a republic, if you can keep it, basically. In other words, it takes a moral people in order to keep freedom and liberty. And without that, people are going to crave authoritarianism. And because that's historically what mankind has had. Our experiment of freedom and democracy only works with a moral and religious people. Our founders said that explicitly. They knew that. They just talked about it every chance they could, because they just come from a great, huge revival. People don't know the history of America early on, but we had this huge revival called the Great Awakening, First Great Awakening. It changed the whole nature of American society. I mean, people were all going to church, and they were all reading Bible. They were all Christians. They were all serious believers, and so that helped motivate the American Revolution. And so only a country that has a moral conviction, a religious and moral conviction, can actually keep freedom. Without that, you're going to have people demanding authoritarian style leadership because of the chaos that sin creates. So, I tell you what, let me play this clip, because this is where we're at. I think that the right is at this point now. We've sort of realized that this is there's no going back. We cannot afford to lose again. And there has to be a winning, just a complete resolution of this cultural clash. Either the left is going to win or the right's going to win. But we can't have these left-right swings in the country anymore, because it's too dangerous. So let me get this queued up, Mr. Producer, and we'll play this.
I think that no, but my first answer is no, but let me qualify that a little bit more. In a situation like this, where you have this existential conflict, what conservatives are realizing is actually there's sort of no moderation here. Actually, it's really just a question of win or lose. And, if you lose, you basically go back to 3 years ago, but much more intense. And you basically see probably everyone involved in the Trump administration prosecuted, and it starts to become more like, when the counter revolution happens, it's like what happened in Poland, when the libs came back into power. They just destroyed everything that the PIS had created almost instantly. And everybody can tell that will be the fate, and the people too, right? And everyone can tell that will be the fate of Trump world the next time they lose an election. And so they're kind of waking up to the realization, which is perhaps a little bit similar to the realization here in Hungary, that no, you just can't afford to lose any more elections. And so actually, that basically puts the Trump administration in a position where it's just no, you actually have to win. And the thing that will basically create peace in America is not, all right, we're going to forget that this happened, because we can't really forget that this happened. We can't forget, that all of these vampires are walking around. You actually have to defeat these people. And what it means to defeat these people, it's like a mountain that's in the distance. As you get closer to, this is a very tall mountain. But Republicans in America have been trying to convince themselves that it's not necessary to win for quite some time. So, one other historical, forgive me for my Putin-like historical lectures, but one other, in a way, the original sin of the post-war Republican Party is the campaign of 1940, in which the Republicans ran Wendell Willkie, who had been a Democrat until 6 months before the election, and agreed with Roosevelt on the major issue, which was, of course, internationalism or isolationism. And, in any system that purports to be a democracy, if the president for life runs one of his own guys against himself, that is a classic managed democracy move. And to say, hey, that didn't happen, or to sort of get back to, it sort of makes it impossible to get back to sort of a balanced, competitive thing. This was what Nixon tried. Nixon is like, all right, I really don't believe in this liberal thing, but here's this regime they built. I'm going to step in. I'm going to run it. It's going to work. And they destroyed him. And now, actually, the American left, at least, it's kind of old and tired. It's not a young regime anymore. And really, I think people are realizing it's win or lose. And we don't even really know what winning looks like, but we definitely know what losing looks like.
Thank you very much.
There we go. So that's it. And I think people are starting to realize that on the right. And we need to figure out what winning looks like. We got to figure it out real quick. And I think part of it, we feel like, the Trump win is certainly, one way of winning, But I think institutional change, institutional overturning is absolutely necessary. We need to go into the universities and overhaul them, clean house, get rid of all this woke stuff, all this leftism that's been in there since the 30s, but it's really taken hold in the past 60 years with all the hippie baby boomers that have come in and gotten tenure. And so we've got to overhaul the universities and the education system, because listen, the liberals don't have kids, right? They don't have kids. They need your kids. They need to indoctrinate your kids. That's why they are obsessed with the education system. That's why the teachers' unions are obsessed with their power. They know that that's their future is to get a hold of your kids and do the drag queen story hour in front of your kids, and indoctrinate them that America's evil, that we're on stolen land and all this garbage. And so we've got to overhaul education. We've got to overhaul the universities. And I'm to the point where I'm almost ready to stop watching college sports, just because I'm tired of supporting universities that are really the villains. The villains of America are the universities. And God, we've got, of course, University of Louisville and Kentucky and this, that, the sports programs are, they are what they are. But the universities themselves need to be overhauled, and we need to capture them back. And so that's what we need to do. There we go. Next segment, we're going to have Adia Wushner with the Right to Life. We're going to talk about some issues going on there. We'll be right back on Kentucky's Voice.
Back to Kentucky's Voice Radio, online at kyvoice.org.
All right, welcome back to Kentucky's Voice. We're still waiting for our guests to dial in, but I wanted to just carry on that conversation we were having in the first two segments about where we're going as a country and what we need to do. And I'll tell you one thing I'm really concerned about right now, and that is the right is having this sort of internal conflict, this internal civil war, and it's it seems like what you see that whenever there's a sort of a revolution or a counter-revolution, the revolutionaries sort of eat their own, and I'm starting to. I feel like we're starting to see that a bit, especially on the online world. There's a lot of online influencers that are kind of at each other's throats, and we need to stop that. We need to stop that right now. And I tell you what else we need to stop. We need to stop all the anti-Jew stuff. There's a whole lot of anti-Jew stuff being, and if you listen to talk radio, you may not hear, but if you're online at the conservative, what do you call it, ecosystem, in the conservative ecosystem online, you're starting to see that now. And there's a few major influencers, Fuentes and Candace Owens, that are on this anti-Jew trip, and of course Israel has not helped the situation with, them just not. I don't know. My only gripe with Israel, they took too long to resolve the issue in Gaza. They should have just went faster. But they were absolutely justified in doing that. Absolutely justified in going in and mowing down Gaza, but they did it the right way. They got civilians out of the way. They told them to move, but they were absolutely right in going in. If Mexico was shooting rockets at us and doing terrorist attacks across the border like that, we would invade. Oh, guess what? We did do that. You know who did it? George S. Patton in 1915. They crossed with him and General Pershing went across the border and took out Pancho Villa and went after his guys. So we've done exactly what Israel did, and look at Afghanistan. If we can do Afghanistan, why can't Israel do Gaza? So anyway, that's another. But this whole anti-Jew stuff that's going on it's really dark and twisted, and we're pulling up all these old demons and these old stories of, there's a cabal of Jews that are taking over the world, and they have all this power and all this stuff, and it's usually a sign of a country about to implode, because whenever you see this rise of anti-Semitism, it's usually followed by some sort of catastrophe. and look at Weimar Germany, and uh, if nothing else, but so it's really concerning, and I'm kind of sick of it, and I think the online world needs to get their head straight. Some of the best conservatives we have, some of the best conservative intellectuals we have, are people of Jewish Jewish descent, and so anyway. We'll talk more about that later in the show, but we have our guest on, Adia Wushner, and with Kentucky Right to Life, who's doing the work of the great work of the Lord there. So, so Adia, how you doing? So, can you hear me okay? Adia, are you back on? Is she okay? She might be muted, but we'll see if she can figure that out. So, Adia, just we're having some technical issues on her end, but anyway, so Right to Life, if you know anything about Right to Life in Kentucky, they're been around for a while, and they're fighting a good fight, and they were responsible for getting the abortion, basically, just in a sense outlawed, prior to the recent court decisions. But so Adia, are you there? Are you?
I'm here.
Okay,
How
there
are
we go.
you? Sorry.
Okay, there we
Can
go.
you hear me?
Yeah, sure can.
Great.
Okay, great. And well, you wanted to come on today and talk about the shutdown, and I think the Hyde Amendment, and so what should viewers and listeners know right now about what's going on with?
Well, I think what I wanted to share with you, because often, what we talk about, what you talk about, doesn't make the national news. Viewers don't have an opportunity to hear what's really happening, what truth is out there. So, as of today, actually late yesterday, we put together with Susan B. Anthony a letter of what I could call a collaboration, and a letter that went out to Congress, speaking about, of course, funding and how they're looking at funding, but to make sure that they understand that in the resolution, the Obamacare subsidies that covered abortion plans, it was there under the Biden. And if they renew it, so we're not saying, we know some of the healthcare coverage is going to be covered, but if they renew it, clever Biden administration and Obama put that through the Treasury, which negates the Hyde Amendment. And the Hyde Amendment, as we know, for over 40 years, has protected taxpayer dollars from not paying for abortion. So it's very important. When you look at this, it's almost 100 of the coalition members, Susan B. Anthony, Pro-Life, Kentucky Right to Life, Family Research Council from across the country, put forth and sent to Congress a joint letter to, making sure that, one, that Congress is aware of this, that appropriately it should be funded, of course, through labor, health, and human services would be the appropriate measure. Then that makes sure that the Hyde Amendment plays into that. So it's just a joint letter, but I think it's important that viewers, we wanted, especially our Kentucky viewers, to know what's taking place and why behind the scenes we're often coming together to fight for issues that may not make the nightly news. You won't see it on the front page of a newspaper, but are very critical for how our taxpayer dollars are spent.
Yeah, and usually issues like this that are under the radar, if congressmen and senators actually get a few calls on a topic like this that isn't covered very well, it really does move the needle. And so
yes,
I think this could be an opportunity for folks that are pro-life in the state to help fix this problem. So basically, the Democrats, the Biden administration, Obama administration, moved a lot of abortion funding to a different department that negates the Hyde Amendment, which the Hyde Amendment precluded people or precluded government funding to go to abortions. But since they moved it over to this department, it can still happen. So what are the Republicans
and what the
doing about
Democrats
this?
falsely claim, I think we want to make sure, because under this whole discussion, when this happened in 2010 under Obamacare, it basically ruptured the longstanding coverage that healthcare plans did not cover abortion, that taxpayer dollars did not cover abortion because the way they put the funding through another mechanism through Treasury.
Okay.
And so the Democrats falsely claim that, I think it's Section 1303, applies to Hyde to Obamacare.
Okay.
That's just simply not the case. And so now that we have a Republican Congress, we want to make sure that this separate payment and separate account, they use kind of this accounting payments. I'll call it a scheme for funding plans to cover abortion. We want to make it's it's an accounting gimmick. Let's just call it. They've used it for quite some time. And we want to make sure as we move forward in the spending bill that these healthcare provisions are correctly applied through the process through labor, health, and human services. And I think
I'm sorry to interrupt, but just specifically, what is the ask if someone was to call Senator Rand Paul or Mitch McConnell's office or whoever your congressman is? What is the ask?
Okay, what we're really saying is we're asking Congress for their consideration to unequivocally what we call the COVID era subsidies that were in Obamacare.
Okay.
To not let these go forward without the provisions of the Hyde Amendment.
I see.
So when it comes to healthcare, any subsidies for healthcare must make sure that the Hyde Amendment is in place.
That's brilliant. That's really
That's
perfect. That's so succinct. Any health any sort of health subsidies that are in the spending bill need to have the Hyde Amendment overlaid onto
to make sure that's in place. That's in place. We don't want our pro-life Congress to become party to this abortion funding scheme that was put forth under Obamacare.
Yeah, brilliant.
And sometimes hidden in the mechanism of how we pay for things. I mean, they're quite clever. And they try to deny that they've done it, but we know they have.
Yes, great. Well, since we have you on today, first of all, call your senator, call your congressman about that.
Please, yes.
And do it right away, because you can have a big difference. You can make a big difference right now, because, like I said, issues that are not covered publicly are very widely. If people do get calls.
And our congressmen and senators are solid on this, but this joint letter, it's pretty amazing from across the United States, all of us coming together, issuing it and jointly in one voice to make sure that voice has gone out as organizations and leaders. But now we want our supporters at home to know about it and to make those phone calls to DC too.
Got it.
If the switchboard is being answered.
Got it.
Or
right.
text
With
or
the government shutdown, who knows? But good deal. Well, I'm sure hopefully Congress is paying their staff. Who knows? But since we have about 2 minutes left, let's and we can hold you over to the next segment if you have time. But I'm curious, what is just going on, and just generally with the pro-life issue in Kentucky right now? What are some things that are going on here in the state that could be?
Well, Kentucky is a tremendously, Tom, a pro-life state. They've had a strong voice. We've heard that voice. The laws protect life, but we have issues. We're preparing. Later on in November, we'll be previewing with the legislature some of the legislation that I'm not going to really talk in depth, but I want to come back and talk about it as we get it kind of all drafted out. And with the pro-life caucus, some of the pieces of legislation we want to put forth this time that we've all kind of come to a conclusion. Abortion pills, we know, are flooding the state. Oh. They harm women. And so this is really what we're looking at is justice for women. Women harmed. Texas has already put back. Louisiana has done such a bill. Please.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Our producer
women that are harmed
left.
by abortion pills. They're getting them from out of state. It's like trafficking an illegal drug into the state. So we're working on legislation that would protect women and give them the legal means if they are harmed for these medications, but also, which aren't really medications, they're death pills. Yeah. But also, It tells the other states, don't do business in Kentucky. Do not do these illegal operations and try to flood our state and harm Kentucky women.
Good stuff. We had that amendment that didn't pass. Well, I tell you what, let's talk. If you have time, we'll hold you over to the next break if you have a moment. So, love to ask you about just the future of what we can do in the state for the pro-life cause. We have Adia Wishner with Kentucky Right to Life, and we'll be right back listening to Kentucky's Voice. And I'll remind you, we have a text line, 502-571-0970, 502-571-0970. Love to hear your thoughts on anything we've talked about today, and specifically pro-life issues.
Kentucky's Voice is your home for real news, real people, and real answers. But we can't do it without you. Your financial support helps us bring truth to the forefront, hold leaders accountable, and give a voice to the people of the Commonwealth. Join the fight today. Give online at kyvoice.org or text KY Voice to 53555. Every gift makes a difference. Stand with us. Speak up. Stay strong. You are Kentucky's voice.
Now, back to Kentucky's Voice Radio, online at kyvoice.org.
All right, welcome back to Kentucky's Voice, and we have our guest today, Adia Wuchner with Kentucky Right to Life. But before we get back to our guest, I wanted to mention this is a viewer-supported, listener-supported project. Kentucky's Voice needs you. We cannot do this program without your support, your actually financial support. And picture us as almost like the conservative version of PBS or KET or something. The way local news and this type of commentary programming works. There isn't a large enough audience for advertising alone to cover the bills, to pay the bills. So we have to have support, viewer support. And thankfully, we are a nonprofit. We're a nonprofit organization, so anything you give to us is tax deductible. And so we certainly would appreciate that, and we're asking for it. And because we had a recent share-a-thon, we did decent with it. Didn't hit our goals exactly, but we need your help. A dollar spent here is a force multiplier to any sort of campaign you would ever give to, because we can help every campaign, every conservative campaign in the state or in this country that's impacted here from Kentucky. So because we can help change the narrative on all these issues. So it's it's a 10-to-1 force multiplier as far as I'm concerned. Anyway, back to Adia Wuchner with Kentucky Right to Life. So Adia, we were talking about how folks need to call and insist that the Hyde Amendment provisions be implemented on any sort of health care oriented spending in the spending bill that's being discussed right now. And so call your congressman, call your senator, and insist that happen, because the Democrats are playing some games and they're trying to work.
Well, and they
work
played
it
them
out.
in the past, and they're trying to reapply them here. And there's the way they do things is say, oh no, there's a provision there that cancels it out. Well, that's not true. So
Right.
as we talked about earlier, having this coalition from around the United States sign on with Susan B. Anthony in this letter was very important. But most important is that, the citizens that are elected officials hear from their citizens at home. So I thank you, Tom, for having us on today, and I'll let
Absolutely.
us kind of share about this, what's going on. There's always something going on in the midst in Washington or here in the state. So
Well, let's talk about this from a big picture level. Because I'm sure a lot of folks who follow the pro-life cause have watched the roller coaster of events, since the overturning of Roe v. Wade, and then of course the of course, the amendment here in the state didn't pass, and so the critics of the pro-life movement have said that, well, you did a great job nationally, but we didn't have our ground game ready at the state level to take on state by state issues. And I don't really blame the pro-life movement as a whole, because there's a natural blowback whenever there's a big win. There's a reaction against that, and so the reaction.
Well, and it was all about timing, Tom. Too.
That's right. Exactly.
The bill had been filed prior to me being in this position. The bill had been filed the year before and the year before that.
Mm-hmm.
It was closed. It had passed the Kentucky. This was the amendment. We'll just talk for amendment on it. We're talking about the Yes for Life amendment.
Mm-hmm.
It was filed the year before. It got to the Senate in the Kentucky and didn't move forward. There was a promise to put it through the next year. Now I come into this position and I'm reminding, hey, Representative Fisher filed the bill. We're going to put it, the constitutional amendment. Everybody was on board. But what happened on June 24th, as we're moving forward, and the prior year, Louisiana and Tennessee our bordering state of Tennessee, they passed their constitutional amendment. So here we are. We fast forward a year forward, and Roe is overturned.
Yeah, right. Just change the whole dynamic.
June 24th, the Dobbs decision. Mm-hmm. So the night the state that had their constitutional amendment on the ballot before us was Kansas. I watched it. I watched the rural areas of Kansas light up and support it on the board, and then I watched those metropolitan areas of Kansas. It was dying. I thought, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
The next day, one of several of the leaders from Kansas said, "You got to get it off your ballot." The lies that this industry is putting out. They were outspent, 6-1. We were outspent 9-1.
Oh,
we knew we needed to raise $1 million, but the misinformation. So it was it was 48-52. It was close, but just not close enough. But with the deception and the lies, look how close we can. And we had so many people come to us later saying, I was confused on how to vote.
Yeah. And like you said, if it would have happened a year earlier before the Roe overturning, it wouldn't have been this controversial issue, and the left wouldn't have been energized, and it would have. So timing is so important in politics.
Yes.
And so,
but thank goodness we had the trigger law.
That's true.
The trigger law kicked in. And by August 1st, of that year was the last of 20, right after the Dobbs was overturned. The trigger law was upheld, and that was the last legal abortion. The abortion facilities, EMW, or anyone that performed an abortion, Planned Parenthood, or even in private practice, was shut down. That mill was shut down.
So there are no abortions going on in Kentucky right now.
No,
right?
The laws are strong. The trigger law basically says, with the exception for the life of the mother or her harm to her, any bodily organ. But at the same time, you have to make an attempt to save both the mother and the child. So we align with those pro-life states across the nation that are mounting. The enemy of life hates it. Last year, the big lies, they always said, well, here in Kentucky, doctors can't, take care of women with miscarriage, septic, a stillborn. Women are going to die. So last year in House Bill 90, we passed a clarification, and it was after much prayer and thought, and then decided to put into law. Planned Parenthood lost their minds. The governor vetoed it. There was an override to the veto, but it just says what's not an abortion: caring for an ectopic pregnancy, a woman with a miscarriage, septicemia. That women we wanted to make sure that no one could put out misinformation and scare women again, that they weren't going to be cared for. And so that was codified into Kentucky law and passed the General Assembly. So we're very grateful for that. But we still have a lot of work to do. Illegal abortion pills. We're also working on, while assisted suicide and euthanasia is illegal in Kentucky, assisted suicide meaning the doctor helps you end your life.
Right.
Euthanasia means you have the medication, somehow obtain it to end your own life. But we have 12 states in the United States where it is legal right now and growing. We were targeted last year with a bill in the Kentucky House called Death with Dignity, which is anything but death. It's just a misconception on dignity, which would have then legalized euthanasia or assisted suicide here in Kentucky. We know that is a merging issue. We're looking very closely. In Canada, it's called medically assisted aid in dying is legal. And for not just those with medical illnesses or the infirm, but also with the mentally ill. And then in 2020, they postponed it, but in a year and a half, it will be legal for minors. So we know that it is that, I call it a death by mail, death by tourism, whether it's abortion or
assisted suicide. Yeah, right.
coming into the state. So we're working on some provisions there to protect Kentuckians and ensure that our laws are in place and that we don't have these, I call it illegal importuning. We had a family reach out to us. I do have a family that realized after the fact that their father had obtained some medications out of state and ended his life. They didn't realize it until they found everything, but he lingered. It's not a simple death. He lingered at home for 19 hours. It was horrendous. He just said a note, please don't call an ambulance, but later found what had happened. So, our job is to protect Kentuckians. That's what laws do, whether they're traffic laws, they're there to protect Kentuckians. But what happens in our heart in ministry is changing the hearts so that we have a culture that doesn't have what I call misplaced compassion,
Right.
but that honors life.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, because so much of the sort of the left-wing view of the world, they use compassion, they use empathy in a way to justify their cause. It's like the poor woman that has this pregnancy, or the man who's suffering all these problems that he wants to commit suicide. But it's a toxic, it's a toxic empathy. Yeah, and so at the end of the day, there's true love and truth. Love and truth have to go together. You can't just separate the two. And the truth is,
it's a worldview versus a biblical view. Truth is rooted, biblically as well, and science. So we're here to uphold truth, and the more we do that, as an ethicist, I'm talking about that all the time, whether from a faith perspective or from a science perspective.
Right.
So we have a couple other issues. We're looking at this session. I've been publishing a 3-part series on, and might shock your viewers to sort of hear it, because when you first have this conversation, and I'd love to talk more in depth as I bring it up, but commercial surrogacy.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about someone who can't have a child and your sister carries the baby.
Right.
That's altruistic. We're talking about big business companies. We don't sell body parts. We don't sell corneas. We don't sell arms, limbs, hearts, organs. We should be selling children. And so this is a big business. I really noticed it when I was in Texas, and I saw billboards a couple of years ago that said, be a surrogate for $100,000. And it plays on women, to commercialize women and commodify them, and it commodifies children.
You're not a woman. You're just an artificial womb. That's all you are. And then we can just have you farm out a baby.
Well, actually, it's very weird. China has actually created a robotic womb now that can carry a child. So, I mean, the technology is taking. I always use this Jurassic Park line where they had the little DNA in the amber, and he holds it up and he goes, just because we can do something, science can do something, should we? And we always have to ask ourselves that question. Just because we can, should we do it?
That's right. Yeah. The ethics in science right now is that's going to be the issue of our life going forward, because of all the changes in technology with of course, AI, biohacking. I think the pro-life movement might want to look into that as well. You're now able to go in and modify your genes. And so you just basically take a shot, you can go in and modify your genes. Now I can have night vision like a bat or something, or now I can have all this crazy stuff.
I know. And there's another company out there we can maybe talk about, who basically their premise is now that every child should be conceived by IVF. And then after we conceive that child, you will then screen, and you can screen out the diseases now in polymorphic screening of the DNA that your child might have as an adult in the future. So you have a perfect person. Disease. So very concerning. The woman who I listened to her for a long time on a podcast, one of the scientists behind it, she said, we had 28 children by IVF. Now, this isn't about, I'm not talking about IVF. Folks that are wanting to have a child.
We only have about 30 seconds left, too. So
we'll come back to this sometime.
No, sure. Listen, I'm going to love to have you back on. I'd love to talk about just the issue of transhumanism. Just I don't know if you've heard of that topic right now.
Yes.
People, and Silicon Valley, all these tech bros are trying to figure out how to live forever. And so
And that's
what's
exactly
that?
what this is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so there is. So that's what we're going to have to deal with. Are we going to be human even going forward? I mean, what is humanity even going to look like? So I think this is just really, really perfectly overlays what the pro-life movement has preached for years. So Adia, thank you for being on the show today. Thanks for
Thank
watching
you.
Kentucky
Thank you,
Voice.
Tom, for having me on
Appreciate
today.
what you're doing. Keep Godspeed, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.